going on? All right, so what's on the agenda today? Well, how do you feel about Jobbik, eh? Yes, the party of the U-turn. They've made it their own. They own the damn thing. If anyone wants to put up a sign stating U-turns are not allowed, they have to get Jobbik's permission first, or face the consequences of copyright law. Jobbik were among the first political parties to congratulate Biden on his electoral success in the US. But is this really the same Jobbik that thought that civil war in Hungary was unavoidable due to the behavior of gypsies? The same Jobbik that suggested, in Parliament, that a list be compiled of all members of Parliament with Jewish roots, because they can't be trusted, can they? There's something odd going on here. In 2018, at the last national elections in Hungary, Jobbik got 19.06% of the vote. That put them in second place after Fidesz and the Christian Democrats, who got 49.27% of the vote. Okay, so a fair gap between the two, but in 2018, Jobbik with their 19% were 7 percentage points ahead of MSP, the Hungarian Socialist Party. Now, that's a lot. 7% ahead of the party which inherited the mantle of power from MSMP, the Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party, the ones who were the communist leaders of the country for 40-odd years. So for Jobbik to outperform them is quite a result. But it's something we need to look at a bit more closely, because when we consider the case of Jobbik, it's not as simple as it seems. Jobbik, at about the time of the 2018 elections, was seen to appeal in the main to young voters. Now, the odd thing about the young voters in the capital was that they went on record as saying that they'd consider voting for Jobbik or Momentum. Now, traditionally, Jobbik was a right-wing, many would say an extreme right-wing party. Momentum, on the other hand, has never been anything other than a very liberal left-wing party. The two are diametrically opposed, aren't they? How can it be that these two are the front runners in the youth vote? Allow me to explain exactly what's going on. When a lot of us heard the views of these young people, it did cause a lot of us here in Hungary to lose our eyebrows as they flew off, heading for the ceiling and beyond, to only return when the shock and surprise had subsided several days hence. Let's have a look at Jobbik's history. Vona Gábor. Now, Gábor decided that he wasn't moving on up at the speed which would have been deserved, and so he took steps to remedy the situation. All right, there's always going to be movement in the world. We live in a world of flux, and so it's natural for our political parties to change and transform over time. The world changes and politics reacts to that just as we do. We change, our institutions change. But here's the thing. Jobbik started out in 2003 as a radical alternative to the conservative Fidesz. What's been most radical to date has been the 180-degree flip that has occurred in Jobbik's policies. Yes, although the party has only existed for 17 years, the change that has been instituted by the leaders has been nothing short of radical. Initially, Jobbik placed themselves to the right of the conservatives. They saw Fidesz as stick-in-the-mud, square, boring, middle-of-the-road conservatives too concerned with maintaining popular support to embark on anything radical concerning, for example, the behavior of gypsies in parts of the country. Jobbik thought that this was a problem which demanded urgent action. Now, Jobbik might have been considered to be a potential ally of Fidesz, but Fidesz always swept that idea off the table. Jobbik were far too radical, too outspoken, and too likely to speak without thinking to appeal to a governing party as a useful partner. Hardly surprisingly, Jobbik's approach to the question of gypsies in Hungary led to their condemnation as an extreme right-wing party, a neo-fascist political force to be. Jobbik was regularly condemned, both at home and abroad, as an anti-Roma, anti-Semitic, neo-fascist political party. Jobbik were roundly condemned by liberals near and far, which of course is only to be expected. Jobbik opposed Israeli investment in Hungary, protested against the holding of the Congress of the World Jewish Congress in Budapest in 2013. In an almost surreal state of affairs, and one which shows the extent to which they have altered their outlook. In 2012, one of their leading lights, Jakab, claimed in Parliament that there was a potential danger represented by Hungarian members of Parliament with Jewish heritage. Jakab suggested compiling a list of MPs with Jewish roots, something that echoed, at least in part, the anti-Jewish laws of the 1930s. Can you imagine the furore that followed his suggestion? Yes! There was outrage at the time, demonstrations were organised and Jobbik were roundly castigated. But it would appear that people's memories are short, and these days nobody seems to remember what Jobbik represented back in the day. Things started to change, realising that political power lay in the middle of things rather than at the two extreme edges of the picture. Jobbik began a move to the left. From 2015, Vona started to change the direction in which Jobbik were moving. This was simply due to the realisation that if they wanted electoral success, they needed to ditch the extremism. They slowly recognised that the comments made by their members both on camera and off camera were causing more damage than they were willing to bear. Jobbik, under Vona, started to attack Fidesz with ever-increasing regularity. Jobbik, for all their bluster, took a long time to develop a plan. They used to be one of the not that parties, whose every utterance against the government stemmed from the fact that if they were in the driving seat, they wouldn't do that. It didn't take too much intelligence to see that they never stated what they would do, merely that what they would have done would not have been that. What would you do? Not that! They used to attack Fidesz from the right, but now it was ever more obvious that they were attacking Fidesz from the left. Jobbik, under Vona, started to clean up their act in order to reap electoral success. Of course, along the way there were bound to be casualties. There were some within Jobbik who felt that this was nothing less than a betrayal of what they represented. They had never wanted anything to do with the liberal left, and yet now their party leadership was steering them in that very direction. Various high-profile members of Jobbik's leadership either jumped or were pushed out. New parties were formed by the departing members. So, a party initially to be found on the far right of the spectrum, now located on the left, all inside a period of a few years. Vona's Jobbik had been strongly anti-EU, but not anymore. In 2017, Vona stated that he could see a case for deepening the EU. Prior to the parliamentary elections in 2014, Jobbik embarked on a journey to become a party with more popular appeal. Radical elements of their manifesto were dropped. Vona promised to root out the radicals left within the party. A lot of Jobbik members saw this as a betrayal of the right wing, and Jobbik started to lose members rather like a sieve. Jobbik then sought to replace those disgruntled members with younger members of society, to whom the new moderate Jobbik would appeal. Having failed to win the elections as he promised he would, Vona resigns. These days, a very different Jobbik has Jakab as its head. Vona started the move towards the centre, and now with Jakab that movement has increased in speed. Jobbik now campaign alongside and field joint candidates with parties who in the past they wouldn't even speak to. Although there are some in the international press who remember where Jobbik came from and what they were, for the most part, Jobbik's past has been erased from popular memory. No longer are they castigated in the international media for being a far-right, extreme, neo-fascist party of thugs. No longer do journalists make reference to the fact that Jobbik was a founding member of the Alliance of European National Movements, along with the French National Front, Svoboda from Ukraine, and the British National Party, amongst others. All of these sins, if not forgiven, appear to have been forgotten. Why? Why, that's simple. Jobbik are now part of the greater opposition to what the international press and liberals concede to be the greatest threat to the universe. Jobbik now state that they, too, oppose Orbán Viktor. And in the eyes of the liberals and the press they promote, that means that Jobbik has been accepted into the club. A party which in 2011 saw a civil war in Hungary as unavoidable as a direct result of the behaviour of gypsies. A party which not only railed against Jews, but referred to Fidesz as Zsides, bastardizing part of the Hungarian word for Jew, Zsidó, and affixing it to the party name, thereby stressing their belief that Fidesz itself was full of Jews and therefore not to be trusted, now works hand in hand with all the other opposition parties, parties that in the past they would have crossed the road to avoid. Amongst these parties are the same parties that roundly condemned Jobbik in the past for being neo-fascist, extreme, racist, anti-Semitic and more. But politics makes strange bedfellows of some, and now all of that nastiness has been swept under the carpet, and they'd prefer if you didn't bring it up. Thank you very much. It might be swept under the carpet. They might have forgiven it, but it can't be forgotten.